I told myself I was protecting the peace. Looking back, I was protecting everyone else's comfort while abandoning my own. Avoidance feels peaceful until you realize you're the one paying the price. Welcome back to Conversations in Becoming. I am your host, Mickey Garcia. This is episode 7. Today's conversation is a little bit of a continuation from last week's conversation. I want to talk about something that I misunderstood for quite a long time. I thought I was a peaceful person. I thought avoiding conflict made me mature. And I thought that staying quiet made me kind. But eventually I realized something that changed everything. Peace and avoidance, those are not the same thing. And once you understand the difference, you will never look at conflict the same way again. So the first point that I want to make today is that peace doesn't require your silence. Many of us confuse calm with peace, but calm isn't always healthy. Sometimes a room is quiet because nobody feels safe enough to tell the truth. And sometimes a relationship feels peaceful because one person has stopped expressing their needs. And that's not peace, that's silence. So our first becoming moment for this episode is this. Keeping the peace should never require losing yourself. So for years in my marriage, we didn't argue. We didn't really fight. And I kind of wore that like this badge of honor, right? I would have family members or friends who would say, oh, my husband or my partner did this or said this and it made me so angry and I snapped back with this and then we were in a huge fight, right? And that happens. Their partner wasn't listening to their needs. And I kind of had this smug feeling inside because I'm like, our marriage isn't like that. Our marriage is fantastic. It's perfect, right? Which, of course, was not even a little bit true. Nobody's marriage is perfect. There is no such thing as perfect, right? But I thought we had such a great relationship because we didn't fight. But the truth is we weren't really avoiding conflict and arguments and these disagreements. We weren't avoiding them because our marriage was perfect and because we had such a healthy relationship. I was making sure that we avoided conflict because I never brought my needs into the relationship. I never expressed them. So, if you guys have watched any of my previous episodes, you know that this was a big thing in my marriage and my whole life really. But in my marriage, I struggled to tell my husband what I needed, what I wanted, what things made me unhappy. It was really hard for me to just say those things out loud. So if he hurt my feelings, I stayed quiet. I just, let it kind of build in my head until I was really upset. I said yes to things I didn't really want to do. I went with him to events that I had no desire to go to. And I did those things partly because that's what I thought a wife should do. That's what I thought being in a marriage meant, that you did things for the other person even when you didn't want to. But then it really kind of got to a point where I was doing them because I wanted to keep the peace. As I started trying to voice my needs and I didn't get the type of response, I don't want to say that my needs should always be right. That's not what I'm trying to say. If he didn't react in a manner that felt safe for me, then I stopped and I wouldn't tell him those things anymore. And so it became easier to just be quiet, keep it in my own head, go off and do my own thing for a little while rather than deal with the anger or the fake hurt, the blame, the guilt tripping. It just wasn't worth it to me. And so I would just be quiet. So the interesting part about this is I knew that wasn't healthy. I knew that. I knew, just like I know now, I knew that healthy relationships needed honesty. You can't build anything that's good and worth having if you're not being your authentic self. But I just didn't know how to be any different. And I didn't know how to deal or how to react myself when his reaction or response was negative. So partly because, that's how I grew up, keeping everything inside, and partly because I learned through the few times that I tried to speak up, that pattern of just keeping quiet, it was already a big part of me, and the responses that I got in my marriage just reinforced that. It just reinforced that was the way I needed to be. Looking back though, and really even then, I knew I wasn't protecting peace. I was just protecting myself from the discomfort that came from upsetting him, making him unhappy, making him angry, and then having to deal with that. I didn't want to, so I just stayed quiet. That really leads into some points that I want to make about avoidance and how avoidance really only delays conflict. So avoidance feels easy today, right? I avoided that argument. I avoided making him unhappy. But tomorrow, the cost is higher because I'm still angry about whatever the situation was. I'm still upset. I'm still hurt, whatever. And because I didn't bring anything up, he doesn't even know there was an issue. So he's just going on about his day, which then typically made me more upset. So small hurts, they become bigger hurts. Needs become resentment, and that's a huge one. And then you've got distance kind of starting to grow in the background of that relationship, and that's not what you want. Avoided conversations don't disappear. They just become resentment. So as our marriage went on, as time went on, I eventually did start to speak up more and more. But once I finally found my voice, oh my gosh, I felt like I had become this horrible, angry ogre of a person. I was carrying so much rage and resentment, through the roof. But also quite a bit of guilt because I kept thinking, my God, how did I become this person? After all, I was the one who had chosen to stay quiet. I was the one who kept saying, it's fine, there's nothing wrong, I'm not upset. I was the one who convinced myself that my needs could wait. So I blamed myself for the anger while at the same time taking it out on him. And that wasn't fair. But over time, I realized something that kind of changed the way that I think about that part of my life. I realized I don't think that I just suddenly became this angry person. It was just years of unspoken needs that finally found a voice. All those conversations I never had, all the boundaries I never set, and all the disappointments that I never acknowledged, barely even to myself. Those things didn't disappear. They just kept waiting. And eventually, they demanded to be heard. They refused to stay quiet a single second longer. So when I look back on that time, I try really hard not to judge that version of myself. She wasn't becoming someone worse. She was just trying to find someone who existed in her own life. And that's one of the reasons that avoidance is so costly. It doesn't eliminate conflict. It doesn't go anywhere. It just postpones it. It puts it off for a later time. And the longer we put that off, the more painful it becomes for everyone. So finally, now let's talk a little bit about how you can find your truth in the peace. So real peace, it's not really the absence of disagreement. People are going to disagree. That is normal human nature. We are not the exact same people, and we're going to have different opinions, right? The difference is it's that presence of safety that makes real peace possible. You can disagree. You can want and need different things. You can disappoint someone and still remain deeply connected. That is what healthy peace looks like. Healthy relationships make room for honesty. That doesn't mean every conversation is going to go the way that we want it to, the way that we hope it will, right? That's unrealistic. Sometimes people disagree. Sometimes someone is disappointed. But healthy relationships are strong enough to hold honesty without requiring one person to disappear. This week, I want you to intentionally notice one conversation that you've been avoiding. Not because you need to have it immediately. Just notice it. Ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I tell the truth? And sometimes that answer teaches us more than the actual conversation. All right, our reflection question for this week is one that I would really like you to give some thought to. Where in your life have you confused keeping the peace with keeping yourself quiet? If you've spent years believing that avoiding conflict has made you kind, I hope today's conversation will give you permission to see yourself differently. You don't have to become argumentative. You don't have to become louder or bigger or more aggressive. You just have to believe that your truth belongs in the room too. As always, if today's conversation resonated with you, I would love for you to subscribe so that we can continue these conversations. If you know a woman who would benefit from these discussions that we've been having, please share this with her. So next week, we're going to be talking about something that a lot of women experience, but they really don't talk about. And that is the loneliness of transition. Because sometimes becoming yourself again can feel incredibly lonely before it starts to feel like freedom. Until then, keep becoming.